today's discussion is focusing on price sheets. Price sheets are a great appointment setting strategy. We'll talk about why. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that we have the Orbitz logo. This is a great example of a price sheet sales strategy. Probably you've used Orbitz or some other type of pricing tool recently or in the past, but you can sense the value of it because technically you could go out and get the pricing yourself. You could call the airlines or the car rental companies and do the comparison options yourself, but that takes a lot of work. And so essentially what they're doing is they're providing value in exchange for leads and in exchange for sales. And that's what we're going to accomplish today, because at the end of the day, our biggest competitor is Google. Because if the customer or the prospect can find the information without you, you're not going to be involved in the sales process, which means you're not going to get the deal. And so you need to provide information in order to provide value, and it needs to be something that they can't readily get already on the internet. Or if they could, at least it helps them save time, like the way Orbitz does. And so that's what the pricing sheet does. But another valuable aspect of pricing sheets is it allows you to create what we call a sideways sales letter or a sales cadence. And this is key to any type of sales process. Customers, especially in the B2B space, have a very long sales cycle, partly because they have multi-year contracts. And so if you're trying to get into the deal, you need to be in front of the customer on a regular basis so that when the timing is right, you're there, they're aware of you, you've already built up a relationship and a reputation. And so because pricing changes over time, providing regular updates allows you to stay in front of the clients. And that's one of the big benefits of a pricing sheet sales strategy, is it's a great segue into a sideways sales letter. Now, when it comes to pricing sheets, one of the key strategies is oversimplifying. You have to remember, when you're providing a pricing sheet, you're not providing a quote. You're just helping them have some high-level information. And so one of the biggest value adds that you can provide in this sales process is oversimplifying the pricing sheet. And so what that means is you're not going to include lots of information, just some very basic information. And what this does is it's going to create significant value for your prospects and for the people that are purchasing, just to have something that's easy for them to consume, and they're going to come back to you because of that. And so that's one of the biggest value adds that you can provide in this sales process. So there's a few other things you want to keep in mind. There's ways that we can provide additional value, but the main thing to simplify is you need to look at the most standard packages. So bandwidth is a good example. So if you're providing a bandwidth pricing sheet, you're not going to compare 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 megs. You're just going to grab one example, the most common bandwidth type, let's say it's 100 megs, and you're just going to compare that. Okay. Same thing with hosting, with IT security. It doesn't really matter if they're not exact matches. You're just trying to give some general sense of what someone's going to buy in whatever that standard package is. And so it's your responsibility to come up with and decide on what's standard and what's not. Now, a lot of vendors will not be interested in you sharing their information on a side-to-side comparison like this, but that's okay. If they want you to hide their logo, that actually works to your benefit, because what you can do is you can actually, the client or prospect will now depend on you for that information. So it does actually help to hide some of the information on the different vendors so that they depend on you for that information, but you still want to provide at least as many as you can. Now, the frequency of contact, optimally, it's around 1 to 3 months. You usually want to wait for changes within pricing to have a good excuse to reach out to them. Also, another big value add is to provide multiple products in a single booklet. And so you can talk about UCAS, you can talk about bandwidth, IT security, commercial real estate space, but each section or each page within this booklet should have a different comparison. And so that's like a multiplier in terms of adding additional value points. And so try to think about everything that your clients are thinking that they would need to know pricing for, whether it's HR services, whether it's products. But if you could provide a breakdown of those in different sections, that would add additional value to what you're trying to do. Now, going back to the oversimplification process, you want to make sure that your price sheets only have 2 categories. I'll show you an example of that in just a second. And the pricing sheet, to maintain the simplicity, you want to make sure that any type of commentary, so let's say there's a price or a promo change, that's something that you want to talk about in your email or maybe on a cover sheet, but never on the price sheets themselves, because, again, the more simple it is, the more value you can provide to the client, and that's one of the big areas that you want to provide information for. PDFs, again, that's a great way to do that. You don't want to do anything super fancy. In fact, one of the areas that customers tend to consume content better is that informal content. You know, we're in that YouTube area where everything is not necessarily polished, and so when it's not as polished as it might look compared to some other professional organizations, it actually looks better for the client because it feels more legit, if that makes sense. And lastly, make sure that your contact information is at the bottom of each page because, again, this is going to take some time to put together. And if you don't get credit and you don't get the sale, then you're not really getting any benefit from that. So here's a quick example of what a price sheet may look like. So this is a bandwidth price sheet. So you would be looking at the different average prices per megabyte per second. You could add a second category, although you don't necessarily need to, but I would add always two. I'm just finding different ways to do that. But you could say, yeah, there's different pricing for the same type of bandwidth, but what's their customer rating, or what's their or talking about awards that we did a few weeks ago, that would be an interesting one to add there as well. Now, pricing sheets is a great segue to go back and talk about what we talked about a few months ago, which was group purchasing cells. Any vendor, I've never met a vendor that doesn't bend their pricing for large enterprise customers. So if you come in with 1,000 sites or 10,000 employees, typically there's going to be some price negotiation outside of the traditional pricing. That's just standard. Now, with group purchasing, you can achieve that with every client. So the way group purchasing sells, we go into this more detail in that call, but just to kind of give you an idea, essentially you create like a union of dental offices in Miami. And so they get a group purchasing contract, which means they get a bulk discount through you, enabling you to have a monopoly. And so group purchasing contracts are great for your price sheets because even though you're disclosing the information of the vendors here on the sheet, they still have to go through you to get that product at that price point. And so you may highlight and let them know that there are certain price points that are only available through your group purchasing contract, and that's something you have to pre-negotiate with the different vendors that you work with. But essentially, to create a group purchasing contract, you just have to have a group of companies that are similar and that buy as a whole, and that you kind of have control over that. But that's a great way to help keep customers around, but also make it much easier to acquire customers within that space. Now, inside of your pricing booklet, there's lots of different things that you can provide. A lot of it depends on your lead exchange, which we'll talk about in a second. But obviously, you want to include bandwidth, SD-WAN services, commercial real estate options in the local area, HR services, accounting solutions, IT security solutions, managed IT, IoT, UCaaS, cloud computing, CDN, and there's lots of others. So again, when you're working with the lead exchange group, each member of the group will have a few different pages that they can include, and they'll provide the research. You just want to make sure that you standardize the pricing sheet so that they look uniform across the board. But again, the more products that you can include that are relevant to your prospects, the more value you're going to provide within this area. And a lot of these areas can also be included in that group purchasing service. Now, the best way to work with these types of pricing sheets is it needs to be local. Geography plays a big role in lowering customer acquisition costs, and so the more geographical focused you can become, the better off you'll be in terms of lowering your customer acquisition costs. If you go to enstable.com/data, you can pull pretty much any type of list that you can imagine based off of technology, verticals, events, locations, addresses. And so all of these filters should be able to help you find the data that you're looking for virtually any list. And so make sure you use that, and again, enstable.com/data to pull whatever data points you're looking for. Now, if I was sending out an email, this is what it would look like. I would title it Pricing Updates. I've been monitoring the pricing for local technology vendors in this local market lately and wanted to share a few updates with you. See attached. So that's kind of the introduction, the standard introduction. And then as we talked about before, we want to make sure that the commentary shows up here in the body of the email. So the biggest change related to Windstream, who has the leading bandwidth pricing right now. This is likely to change in the future. So you want to create a little bit of urgency so that they know, yes, there's been some changes, but it may not last. And so this is where you can highlight and talk about things, help them provide some insights into what they're seeing on those pages. But also one of the advantages of not providing a ton of information, the oversimplification of the pricing sheet, is that they have to depend on you for the details. And that's one of the reasons why you also want to limit that information in the pricing sheet. You want to make it simple, but you also want to make sure that the pricing sheet isn't taking you out of the sales equation, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. Now, another strategy that works well with this that we've seen with different sales reps is if you go to listanalytics.org, you can pull a list of local stats for any given market. And so if you have a minimum of 30 pages in your pricing booklet, you can convert this into a book on Amazon using the KDP publishing. Now, we did a training about that a little while back, but if you look at the book publishing, we'll walk you through the whole process. But listanalytics.org will actually show you everything that you need to know about that specific market. So whether it's when the offices were built or what types of CRMs they're using, but it's a great tool to analyze a given market, and you can include this in your pricing booklets. So in addition to providing pricing sheets for all the different variety of services in that area, you can also provide some interesting stats so they can understand what other companies are doing in that market as well. And so what this does is it helps you get closer to that 30-page minimum for booklets, and then you can create a physical booklet for printing. And because you go through KDP, it's extremely cost-effective. And if you have an Amazon account, it's free to send out. So essentially for about $2 a booklet, you can ship it to free to as many businesses in any given market and provide this booklet on a regular basis. Providing physical content like this is a very effective sales strategy in case email isn't reaching your prospects. Hopefully that made sense. So just to review, before you do anything, you always need to have a lead exchange. A lead exchange is essentially a group of individuals who complement each other with different products and services. So you can think about a CRM provider and a UCaaS provider complement each other really well, and they don't compete with each other, but they add value to each other. So that would be an example of a lead exchange. You can create a lead exchange on leadexchange.org. You can either join or create one and look for different partners to work with. Make sure that you leverage group purchasing, because when you are providing pricing sheets, the fact that you have a monopoly on a specific vendor makes the whole pricing sheet so much more effective when you're sharing that with prospects. Creating pricing booklets, whether a physical one or a virtual one or both, are extremely effective, especially when you combine multiple products in one shop. You're providing significant value to your prospects when you do that. And then again, because pricing and things change, it's always helpful to provide regular updates, insights, and just information. And what you'll find is that your prospects will actually look forward to your emails rather than delete them. So hopefully this will make sales a little bit easier for you. If you have any questions or if you need a copy of the slides, just let us know. In 2 weeks, we'll be talking about cross-selling, which is different from upselling. But we'll talk about some new tools that we have related to this and how to actually accomplish that. So again, thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. If you have any questions, let us know. And we hope you have a great weekend. Talk to you soon. Take care.